Not too long ago, a subscriber I used to have a fair bit of contact with got back in touch with me after an extremely long period of absence, well over half a year, perhaps even longer. Now, he went MIA for reasons I'm about to discuss, and what he effectively had undergone was what I refer to as a blue pill relapse. Now, during this period, I didn't hear anything from him, but this wasn't the first time I had heard of such situations, which is to say I've had subscribers in the past write to me about romantic encounters they had with women that went awry, and somewhere along that journey of said romantic encounter, their red pill hardware malfunctioned, and they are effectively acting and reacting like wet behind the ears blue pillars. And this is what happened in this particular gentleman's case. Now, I'm not assigning blame to this gentleman or anyone else. Things happen and things are the way they are and everything is the way it is. But I do think there is a distinction, and I've stressed this distinction many times, between internalizing something and understanding it. You can understand many different things without ever having to have internalized that knowledge that is associated with those things. And I think oftentimes MGTOW-minded men think they've understood everything, but the reality is that something hits them in the face, a woman or some romantic situation or relationship, and they get completely thrown out of order. Now, in this particular gentleman's case, I had several opportunities to talk to him for a few hours, and it became very apparent to me very quickly that everything he was describing to me was symptomatic of effectively being blue pill. But that doesn't mean he is blue pill. It means something about the blue pill state is differentiated from the red pill state. Now, the specific circumstances of this gentleman was he got involved with a woman who had 3 children and who cheated on her husband. I mean, the kind of situation that you would think no red pill, knowledge-based man would ever get involved in. I mean, it sounds almost suicidal. It sounds absolutely absurd, and yet here he was and got into this situation. Now, once again, I'm not assigning blame, and he's certainly going to hear this and see this, and he realizes that as well. But in my listening to him, I had to make the observation to him, and I have to make the observation here, that the blue pill relapse is really a relapse into a purely instinctive, emotive, emotional state. The red pill state is one born entirely of observation and reason and to some degree rationality. It's detached. It doesn't really assign values such as, good, bad, evil, good, these sorts of things. It simply observes and it moves on. Now, to some extent, this gentleman was surprised by his very behavior. I mean, he knew this stuff. He's a smart guy. He is working towards a degree in science. He has a background in another difficult field. I mean, he's no dummy. But something happened that basically broke down his entire system of reasoning. And the interesting thing here in narrating his tale to me was that I observed that it was quite incredible. Everything he was saying was coming from an emotional state. There was almost nothing rational about what he was saying. I mean, I'll give you some examples. He was shocked, for example, at how the woman had pushed the ejection button. And I've talked about the ejection switch theory before. I mean, just one day everything's fine. Next day, it's all gone. And he talked to me as if this were shocking and surprising. And I, removed and detached from the situation as I am and always have been, that's the way women are. And what effectively I had to observe was that, and I didn't tell him this, but I'll see now or listen now, he is in a state, this blue pill state, where he is attributing to the woman male attributes, a sense of responsibility, a sense of being held to account, the desire to understand things in a logical fashion. He was in a state of exasperation. How could she do that? How could she act this way? I mean, she has 3 children. She cheated on her husband. All these things. None of it made sense to him. And of course not, because he was attempting to understand this behavior from his own perspective, which is to say from a male experience, not from an experience of passive and detached observation. He wasn't thinking, oh, this is a woman and this is what they do. And even after having told him something to that effect, he still wasn't in that place. And here we see how emotions can completely take over and essentially supplant all the knowledge that's been absorbed over time regarding the red pill. And I think everyone ultimately is at a different stage. But a lot of this probably has something to do with male mother need. It's not just sex in these cases. The desire for intimacy and all of these things. And during the conversation, I also realized that maybe, based on what he had told me, he had never actually grappled with some of these ideas. The possibility of, never being intimate again with a female. Now, I don't like to use the term grapple in my own case because it's not something I've ever grappled with. I simply have accepted it. There's a kind of life that I like to live, a kind of lifestyle I appreciate that would be, for lack of a better word, contaminated by attempts to entertain a relationship and participate in one because of the necessary demands it puts on you, financial, time-wise, etc., stress-wise. And so I've accepted that. And everything at the end of the day is cost-benefit and transactional. So what is the cost-benefit of that? Well, you lose sex and intimacy, but that isn't really a big deal to me. Now, I do realize that for many men, it is a big deal. And so throwing that away, and I'm using that term intentionally, throwing it away, is a big deal. And it's very difficult to come to grips with it. He sort of repeated the statement out loud. I mean, the rest of your life, you're never having this feeling or associating with this. But to me, that's just a perfectly normal thing. And the benefits associated with pursuing a relationship and having these sorts of situations are just so far off from the negatives in terms of all the negatives I can immediately anticipate that it just doesn't enter my mind. And we also had a conversation about, what do you replace it with? Now, I explained to him the conversation as I am now. It's a bad question. I mean, what do you replace the desire for male mother need with? Well, it's illusory in the sense that it can't be fulfilled. And if you believe in a fictitious deity your whole life, you're best advised not to start asking the question, well, what do I do with my feelings or desire to appreciate some omnipotent power now? If there is none, then there is none, and you don't need to really worry about it very much. I mean, pursuing an illusion is a waste of time, I think. And like I said, I've had conversations with friends and received PMs where this sort of blue pill relapse is very much on display. And I think as far into the red pill as many men are, they perhaps haven't completely grasped the ramifications and the consequences of it. Now, of course, there are red pill men that pursue relationships and I guess even marriage to some extent, or at least fuck around. But the very fact of the matter is that almost certainly, to a T, these men are constantly trying to, at the very least, reinforce their rational mind, their rational thoughts, and trying to apply them. The minute they let their emotions take over, they're potentially endangering themselves by relapsing into this blue pill state. Because at the end of the day, what is a blue pill state in this particular realm, the realm of reproduction and male-female relations? It's a state of ignorance and emotion. As when he's explaining things to me, he doesn't realize it, but he's explaining everything from the point of emotions and feelings, and he's just in a state of astonishment. How could she do X? How could she do Y? It's pretty easy. She's a woman. That's how she can do it. And you're not, and you don't understand that. But you don't understand it only if you choose to stay in that particular emotional blue pill realm. And I think it's entirely possible that there are men who just can't completely turn the switch off. It's just always going to be there. And to those men, it's a potential danger, a real danger, getting involved with women. There are other people who I think are much better at it. I mean, if you look at someone like Barbarossa, who's been in a relationship, aka married for several years now, I'm almost certain he maintains an iron control over his feelings, and he's always, at the very least, reinforcing the rational side of his mind so as not to fall prey to the emotional blue pill side that dwells within. I think all of us have that potential, because at the end of the day, we're talking about tens of millions of years of mammalian evolution here. These instincts are that powerful. But I think there are a couple of observations to be made here. First, you can't replace something that isn't there in the first place. I mean, the desire is certainly there, but if the desire is for something that never was present, never existed, like the desire for God or any other deity, or the desire for some other fiction, and likewise the desire for the fulfillment of male-mother need, that is a waste of time. Now, you could simulate that, I suppose, pay a prostitute in an official sense, or engage in the unofficial prostitution of the typical relationship, and I suppose you would get some kind of simulation substitute of that. I'm not sure, but it certainly wouldn't be real, and it would all be predicated and conditional, like everything else is in life. So, number one, no, it's not really worth pursuing an illusion if you happen to be a man and find yourself in this situation. The other thing is that once that blue pill emotional side kicks in, it's very difficult to go back to the detached red pill side. And I think that if other men decide to get in a situation like this, or find some woman they find attractive or interesting, whatever interesting means, want to fuck, they really need to constantly reinforce that red pill knowledge and apply it to themselves. Because once you start being surprised and engage in misunderstanding and just don't understand what's going on, that is an indication of effectively being blue pill. And I suppose a lot of MGTOW knowledge is passive, but the real application comes when you've either confronted these issues directly within your internal psyche, which I might be bold enough to claim I've done. Like I said, I've said, okay, these are the costs, these are the benefits. It's just not worth it for me. Or you continually pursue relationships, but you maintain that essentially iron wall of red pill knowledge and rationality. The consequences to falling for this could be potentially devastating. In his case, not so much. He discontinued his studies and he's lost interest in some of his hobbies, such as music, but, he hasn't lost a fortune and he's not suffering ill health because of it. He's emotionally distraught, but that's pretty much it. But what this will ultimately beget, in his case, and I think similar cases, is the reality that these issues, at the very least, privately need to be confronted and thought of. Otherwise, you can do what a lot of, I suppose, red pill or MGTOW-minded men do when they date or pursue relationships, is they always maintain that sort of thing. I mean, take someone like Nico Chomsky. He's an incredibly libidinous person, so he probably couldn't live without sex, and so he has to pursue these relationships with females, and so he always maintains that red pill knowledge. For the most part, there's always the potential for relapse. And a final point here is if you've ever listened to conversations between Nico Chomsky and Rollo Tomassi, and this comes into the realm of cost-benefit, listen to all the effort and the work that's required when Rollo Tomassi talks about maintaining a marriage or relationship. He claims it's not work. He claims it becomes sort of second nature. But you need only to listen to it and realize, wow, that is just not worth it for the most part. Now, I'm not going to tell individual men what they should do or shouldn't do. Frankly speaking, at the end of the day, I don't care, in the sense that you're free to do whatever you want. But I think there's always that potential danger of relapsing into a blue pill state where you're as lost as you would be as a, wet behind the ears 20-year-old who actually doesn't have any of the knowledge. So, really there are only two options, in my view. Either the constant application and reinforcement of red pill knowledge whilst pursuing relationships, or a legitimate evaluation of what the costs and benefits are and whether or not you want to waste your time with that. Do you possess the individual faculty to separate these things, to separate your emotions? all these things are important when you consider these things. And I think going forward, this particular gentleman who reached out to me will have to consider that. It might be that in his case, he does not possess the necessary hardware as an individual to separate these things, and thus he'll have to entertain other possibilities. Or maybe now he does, now that he's gone through this situation. I mean, I can't tell him what to do, and I don't even think he's at a stage now where he can consider that. But it's not the first time. I've seen and heard stories from men of similar bent, and it's just something that men really need to reflect on. It's not enough just to sort of passively absorb the red pill and think, oh, this is really interesting, this is how reproduction works. I mean, if you're going to really take the dive and do this stuff, then you're in it, and you really need to think, that's a woman, it's a completely different species virtually from me, completely different motivations, completely different reproductive drives, completely different interests, and I'm never allowed to think in terms of applying male desires, emotions, interests, motivations to her, because that will lead you down the path of folly, and eventually you're going to take a big fall. So I guess that's a bit of a review to some extent, but it's also something that not many people talk about, the notion of a blue pill relapse. And once again, I'll stress, I think everyone has that potential, even myself, but you also really need to know yourself to prevent that sort of thing. And, you know, some people, I guess, non-MGTOW minded men would just fully embrace that sort of thing. But I think for everyone who has an interest in reproductive biology, who wants to live a life that is free of some of the worst stresses, which are often associated with so-called romantic love and what have you, and some of the destructive consequences, then these are things that you very much must consider if you're so inclined. Of course, free to do whatever you want. Anyway, on this topic, that's all I have to say. Beware of the blue pill relapse. That danger is always there. We're talking about deep primal instincts and something to consider going forward, whether you choose to renounce that forever for the rest of your life or you pursue it. The open, active application of red pill knowledge is a must. Never succumb to emotive states that don't really get you anywhere and only bring you down and eventually could potentially destroy you. And thanks for tuning in. I will check you out later. Bye-bye. If you liked this video, please like, share, and subscribe. And if you enjoy my content, please consider making a donation or becoming a patron. Thanks for watching.